This is Joe Andolino, and we're going to repeat a seminar that we gave in Naples, Italy over a month ago. And the reason this is a hot topic is simply the dollar is very strong. It's at a 20-year high. The euro is basically at par, and Italy is a place where a lot of people want to go. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Antonello, who's a very good colleague. We've co-represented clients over the years. I have a great deal of confidence in Antonello. And you need a trusted advisor when you're in a country that's not your own. Antonello, take it.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Joe, for the introduction, and thank you, the Smolin Lupin firm, to host me here and to organize this event. As Joe told me already, I'm an Italian attorney, and our firm focus on Italian real estate acquisition. So we are here today to talk about purchasing properties in Italy and why this process is different when compared to the U.S. legal system. And we will say that this is quite different process when compared to the United States because
you can turn the slide.
First of all, there is a different legal system which affects the entire process, and there are different rules and there is different regulation, and these wouldn't allow a foreign buyer to easy purchase a property in Italy. First of all, the Italian system of regulation is much different than when one would expect buying property in the United States. For example, in Italy, escrow services don't exist like in US. So there are more risks which need to be mitigated through a more accurate due diligence of the property. As a foreigner, it would be difficult to deal without knowing the language and the Italian law. And most of all, what is I would say one of the most critical difference is the different role played by the Italian real estate agent. In fact, according to the Italian law, the realtor has to be independent from both parties. The real estate agent can't represent the seller or the buyer, but he has to keep a neutral position with respect of all the parties. And if we go back to a U.S. legal system, as you know, as everybody knows, in U.S. there is usually two realtors, and one represents the buyer, the other represents the seller, and this helps especially the buyer to be protected, to know what he is doing, and to make accurate due diligence of the property. And in Italy, the realtor, unfortunately, according to the legal system, cannot represent the buyer and even the seller, but he still keep a very close relationship with the seller because the realtor is not chosen by the buyer but by the seller when he decides to put on the sale market the property. And also the realtor, unfortunately, because doesn't help to match the party to make a fair deal, a good deal, a clear deal, his primary function is just to bring together the buyer and seller in order to make a deal. So they link the parties, he show the property, and he doesn't help the buyer to.
So Antonello, let me interject because we've talked about this before, and you know when you're in the States and you're looking for real estate, right? Typically, when you go to a realtor, you've got a multiple listing system. So regardless of the realtor you choose to go to, you're seeing most of the properties that are held for sale. So you have visibility to the market, and presumably you're working with a realtor who's giving you information. What I noticed when I was in Italy looking for real estate is you go into a real estate agent, and they've got, you know, like everywhere, beautiful photographs of beautiful properties if you're in a resort town like Positano and you go there. But I guess I found out only from you after the fact that there really is no multiple listing system I think you're only seeing that particular realtor's listings. Is that correct?
Right, right. In Italy, this is another difference between the system, Italian and American system. We don't have the multiple listing system. So when you go to one realtor, he just show what the listing he has.
Exactly.
So the apartment, the properties that he is handling. If you want to see other properties, you have to go to another realtor who will have probably another group of properties. And you want to see another property in the same time, you have to go to another realtor who will have different,
Right.
even different properties. So that's why when you don't need to work with just an attorney. If you are visiting multiple properties, you have to probably work with 2, 3, or 4 different realtors.
And the risk there, and you know, that's, I understand, but on this last dot point on this page, and everybody should focus on this because this is a serious economic difference that you can learn the hard way. The realtor can charge his fee to buyer and seller. So making numbers easy, if it's a 6% commission and you're the buyer, you better come to closing not only with, let's say it's $100,000 euro property, not that there are many of those, but it makes the numbers easier. You've got to bring the 100,000 euros and you've got to bring another 3,000 euros because the realtor is charging the buyer a part of the commission. Is that normal?
Right, that's right. This is another huge difference because in the
Right.
States, I guess all the audience knows, when you buy a property, the seller will pay the fee to the realtor. In Italy, according to the Italian law, we have a specific rule which entitle the realtor to charge to both parties 3% and 3%. I'm talking about 3%, but this is the minimum required by the law. But usually the realtor try to charge even 4% to the buyer and 3, maybe 2% if the seller is smart enough to negotiate. So he will get 4% by the buyer and 2% by the seller. And this is another very important issue why a foreign buyer wouldn't need an attorney, because as an attorney, we usually negotiate. First of all, we negotiate the fee with the realtor.
Right.
And after that, we start to make the due diligence and we negotiate the price with the seller. So an attorney and a foreign buyer coming in Italy, he wouldn't know what to do with the realtor. And
Right.
probably he would trust a lot. He will rely a lot on the realtor, but the realtor is not the right person to rely on because they don't care a lot to protect the buyer.
Well, we think there's, you know, we could say there's so many, I'm sure, competent and let's say decent and, you know, ethical realtors, but I do agree that it would make a lot of sense. We can go to the next page to have an engagement letter with the realtor in writing that's negotiated with the help of an attorney would make sense.
Yeah, for sure they are competent, they are ethical people, but it's not their role. So they don't.
Right.
Their function, their primarily function is not to protect the buyer, do not represent the buyer. That's why they do what they do, but they don't do enough to make feel the buyer protected.
Exactly.
When they enter into the negotiation.
How about, just before we look at this, how about the market in Italy right now, Antonello? I know you do a little real estate investing yourself, and you acquire properties and rent them. What is the market like in Italy, if you could generalize just for a second? I mean, do you see a lot of foreign buyers right now, and is the market cooling off after COVID? I mean, what are you seeing?
Oh, the market right now is going very good, especially in the main cities like Milano, Roma, Firenze, and Naples. And these 4 cities are the city where the real estate market is growing a lot. Milano is the number 1 city for growing in the real estate. There is a huge demand of real estate. There is not a huge market, so the property usually stay on the market no more than 2 weeks when the price is fair.
Are we talking about residential or commercial or both?
We're talking about more residential, but even commercial. Rome, Florence, and Milano are going very well, very good. And there are a lot of foreign buyers. I receive every day emailing questions and inquiries to purchase a property in Italy. Doesn't matter, from Calabria to Piemonte to Lombardia to Milano. there is interest to everywhere, and especially U.S. buyer now are very interesting since the dollar, like you said in the introduction, is much stronger than
Well,
years ago.
it's a 20-year high. I mean, the dollar is at par with the euro, except for a few decimal points here and there.
Yeah, and a very interesting point about this question that with a modest amount of money that here in the States, you can purchase probably a condo in one of the major cities like Miami, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco. So one bedroom apartment, one studio. You can purchase in Rome a nice condo in the center and probably with two bedrooms and maybe one nice bedroom apartment in Milano. So because with 500, 600 euro, which will be even less.
500 or 600,000 euros.
It's 1,000, yeah, right. I don't think in the States you buy now in the major cities more than one studio probably.
I think it depends on the city.
Yeah.
It depends. It's very, very difficult to generalize. I think, one thing we know about real estate, all real estate is local. In New York, it depends on the street to street. And, things are slower than they were. But I would agree, historically speaking, there isn't much available that's quality below that number, whether it's a condo or not. I would say in New York City, that's about the minimum. That's right. Most of them are going to be more expensive. This is an interesting slide because this is another major difference about the Italian buyer.
Yeah.
Any buyer has to pay a purchase tax. This is a one-time tax. Antonello, can you tell us about this?
Yeah. In fact, during the negotiation of the property and before to start the deal, when you intend to buy the property in Italy, there are some tax issues that can come out, and the buyer needs to be aware in advance because usually it's an issue that comes out 2 days earlier to sign the deed of sale in front of notaio, which is something that probably we will go later to talk about the function and the role of the notaio in Italy, which is very different than the public notary in the States.
Right.
Notaio is a kind of lawyer. He is very competent in the law, and so usually the poor foreign buyer comes in Italy and appear before the notaio in Italy, and he will get a big charge of taxes to pay. So this is something that the buyer should investigate enough time in advance. How much will be the purchase tax? Because in Italy, when you purchase a property, you have to pay the purchase tax. The purchase tax depends on several factors. First of all, the legal entity buying the property. And secondly, the purpose of the purchase. In general, let's say that the purchase tax is 90% of the value of the property.
9%. 9%.
9%.
And it's not the value that you pay for the property. It's something like what we would call the assessed value. But
assessed value. Yeah. And this value is assessed by the Italian tax agency, which is the Italian IRS in charge for taxation. And they every 10 years they issue a tax value of the property.
A
reassessment, which is usually 8 to 9 times less than the purchase price.
Right.
So let's say that you pay the purchase price 1 million, the tax value, the assessed value will be 100, 150, something like that. So
right.
We calculate the purchase tax
9,000 euros on €1 million.
Yeah, 9% over 150.
Right.
150
right.
Yeah.
In which case it'd be 14,500 euros on $1 million. But there is a way to get this down.
Yeah.
And we should talk about that, and that has other consequences. How do you do that, Anthony?
There is another option which need to be assessed and discussed individually with the client and assessed all the situation in advance. Because if you buy a property in Italy, you intend to come to Italy and you would like, according to the Italian law, to establish a residency into this property, you are entitled to pay only 2%.
And this would apply to Italian citizens, non-residents, U.S. citizens, dual citizens, any buyer of real estate. So if I come to Italy and I find a dream house and I say, I intend to make this my primary residence, is that the word?
This would apply, just to answer to your question, this would apply to the non-Italian, the dual citizen, and but it's important to match a requirement of a residency. It means come to Italy, check your visa status.
Right.
For the not Italian people. If you are Italian, you have to register in the city to establish a residency in the city and to establish a residency exactly in that property, and you will be resident. And after that, you will be, if you intend to do that, when you purchase the property, you would make a declaration in the deed of sale that you intend to establish a residency, and you have 18 months to do that, and you will pay only 2%.
2% of the assessed value.
Of the assessed value.
So in our case that we talked about before, where you were paying $14,500, you pay $3,000. And this is a one-time tax, right, Antonello? You pay
only one shot, right?
And you have 18 months to
file the application to register as a resident.
As a resident, and you know whether or not this has income tax consequences, and it might, is another subject. So you really need to get with your tax advisor and think that through. But I guess the point here is don't be surprised, because the typical American buyer, first of all, doesn't really even have a bank account in Italy, right? That's not an easy thing to do.
Right, it's not, yeah.
Not an easy thing to do. He's got to close in a certain period of time. We know the stress. And he has to have available funds, which he basically has to wire, I guess, to the notar's account, right? I mean, the notar is going to have a closing statement that's going to say it's not just the million, it's the million plus, and the plus is either 2 or 9%, depending on which of these you. And then there may be adjustments for the typical, you know, utilities, real estate taxes, etc. So the actual mechanics of the acquisition process are different and need to be thought about in advance, or they're going to cause you so much aggravation you're not going to have a good time. Let's keep going.
Yeah. So let's go to take a look in a little more in details about the.
This is the due diligence that really should be done when you negotiate with the owner of the property. And just to tell one story, because it's kind of interesting, Antonello and I had a situation where a client of mine called and was very interested in buying his grandfather's house in the south of Italy, and he had gone down the road a little bit. He had had a notar and he had had a local attorney, and he wanted to know if there was anything to think about. I said, really, I would have Antonello take a look at the deed. Antonello took a look at what I guess is a chain of title, and he saw some things in the chain that he didn't like. And, you know, we suggested to my client that he go back physically, and he was very interested in this property because it was very reasonable, it was emotional, it was his great-grandfather's or grandfather's. And basically, to make a long story short, he found the presence of squatters. And, you know, look, southern Italy has a refugee issue. Everybody, I think, that keeps up with what's going on in the EU knows that. They just had a change of government. Giorgia Meloni became the prime minister primarily, and she's center-right because she said she's going to solve this problem. So the EU has a very open border policy, basically. And the refugees come in. Obviously, they're coming from the south, North Africa, wherever. They come to Italy, and they find a local place where there's a vacant house, and they are squatting. And it's not so easy to get them out, right?
Right.
To know it's not so simple.
Right.
So, I mean, you don't want to buy your
time in the court to get the judgment.
I mean, you don't want to buy your grandfather's house on an emotional buy and find out that when you go to start to repair it, that there's people living in there. So there really is a need for due diligence. Do most of your clients that come from the States or outside of Italy physically go and do diligence, Antonello?
Usually the clients, they don't do a lot of due diligence because they rely on the realtor. But when they hire our firm, we do due diligence, and we always find something which allow us to negotiate the price or to negotiate the term and condition of the binding agreement. and this helps a lot, not just us, but the client, the buyer, because probably help to get better condition. So let's go. But I would like to go through what any buyer by themselves with the help of an attorney or some professional should do before to enter into a negotiation of a real estate. So the first preliminary thing to do is to assess and to check who is the legal owner of the property, to be sure that you are negotiating with the right person, with the legitimate owner. After that, to assess if there are any legal case pending against the owner of the property, because you could probably the owner could be clean, but the property is not clean in terms of a litigation recorded on the public register.
We would have a lis pendens in the U.S. They must have a similar.
Yeah, but you have to go for this. You have to go to the Italian courts where the property is located. No, and the realtor is something that they cannot do. Only the attorney can have access to this data. And because if you theoretically you can purchase a property with the case pending against the property, but if you don't know, once you are the owner, maybe the person who made the claim can claim some money, can claim the property from the
and
buyer.
You're stuck. You have to sue you have to sue your seller, and it's a problem. Do they have title insurance in Italy?
Yeah, we don't have the title insurance, unfortunately, like you have in the States. That's why we do all the job in advance in the law firms. And sometimes the notario does this, but just at the last minute when the buyer puts the first down payment in the hands of the realtor or in the hands of the buyer. So it's not very convenient for the buyer to give the 10% or 20% as down payment, and then you have to claim, you have to go to the court to get back this money if you can't purchase the property.
I think that's a very important point, and I want to stop here and just reiterate. In the States, this issue would be probably resolved with title insurance, depending on the exceptions. They don't have title insurance in Italy. It's another reason why you really do need to do a great deal of diligence up front with competent professionals, and that doesn't mean just the notaio and the broker. You do need a competent real estate lawyer, real estate attorney who can check title, do a title search, and check courts to see what outstanding legal cases exist. Obviously, it's better to know this in advance than after the fact. You don't want that.
Right. So after making the preliminary checks and you're sure that so you can submit an offer.
Next page.
The offer should have some minimum requirements, which are, of course, the offer price, the time that you would like to make the closing, and when we talk about closing, we mean the deed of sale before notaio.
The passing of the deed that will give the buyer title, so his name is now on the deed, is the closing. That's what closing is.
And these will entitled to transfer the property and to record this deed of sale, deed of closing in the Italian public real estate register.
Right.
And another thing that I think is worth noting that in most of the cases in Italy, the houses are sold without furniture and even without kitchen. So if a buyer wishes to purchase the furniture, the buyer has to specify in the purchase offer. Otherwise, the seller would deliver the property empty without furniture. And it's something that I pointed out because I know that all the American buyers usually expect to have at least bathroom and kitchen.
Bathroom and kitchen is
furnished. Usually, and so probably even some further furniture. So it's important to keep in mind that when you enter in negotiation, if you like some furniture, you have to put in the purchase offer.
Yeah, and I think most people are expecting the bathroom to be intact and the kitchen to be intact. Basically, what you're buying, if you don't say anything, is the bare walls inside of the apartment or house. So if you don't expect it to be empty, you need to have that in the contract, is really what you're saying.
Yeah. So let's say that you have submitted an offer and the
Next page.
the seller accepts your offer. He likes the price, the timing. You would like to close. So that is the moment. That is the time to start to perform the real due diligence, and if it needs even the technical inspection of the property. Of course, real technical inspection, like you do in the U.S. It would need most of all in the villas, in the houses in Tuscany, in the very very old properties, because if we are talking about the condo, the apartment in the big cities, in recently built building, probably you wouldn't need a real technical inspection, but it's important that you visit the property not just with an attorney but also sometimes with an architect, because according my experience, in many cases, most of the cases, the realtor advertise the property with, for example, let's say that this property is 100 square meters big, but this includes the wall. And in Italy, in many old buildings, the walls are very deep. And
so they measure it from the outside.
From the outside. So when a property will be 100 square meters, when you go to measure the livable square meters will be much less. And it happened very recently in the one property, which is on behalf of a client of mine in Rome, from Connecticut. He is willing to buy a property on the top of Spanish Square. That's probably most of all.
Yeah, it's a beautiful area. I know it well.
Yeah, and the seller, the realtor declared that it was 85 square meters. I took a professional interior designer with me, and she assessed that it was just 50 square meters.
Big difference.
And the buyer gave up because he didn't want to buy for a huge price, big price, just 50 square meters, which will be just one bedroom apartment, and this property
I think in square feet it's like
less than 1 million, almost 1 million.
450 square feet.
So yeah,
450, 500 square feet times 9, right?
Yeah, right.
Meters to square feet. And how much do they want for that?
Almost 1 million.
1 million euro.
So, and the client gave up, and now he's looking for a bigger apartment in another area of Rome. So it's important to be aware what you are buying, not just from legal angle, but also from technical point of view, and that is very important to make a visit with a professional, including an architect. And this is something what we usually do, because I have in our team, we have an interior designer and architect who always help us to assess the right.
And I assume your contract provides that you will verify and validate the square footage, and if it's not accurate, you can get out of the deal. Who holds the money in the meantime? Where is the money? Is there a down payment required here?
But in this process, when they accept the offer, I don't recommend the buyers to give the first down payment unless we don't finish the due diligence.
In time. Okay.
In time. So,
I like that. And that's accepted? Is that acceptable? Is that the market?
Yeah, because we make usually we use a kind of offer contingency or the due diligence.
Okay.
And in this case, so the seller
accepts it. I mean, that's good. That's
because in most of the cases, the realtor is not able to provide the documents.
Right.
All the documents, all the information. So we have to get by ourselves. And that's why we have to also disclose the town planning documents by the seller. If they don't have, we have to go to the city to get these documents to check if the building license are compliant to the town planning.
Well, especially if they with these old buildings, obviously there's been renovations. They should all be pursuant to a permit, and the permit has certain requirements. What you're checking is to make sure you're in compliance. You don't want to buy a building, an apartment, whatever, that's out of compliance with what it was supposed to be done. They may not all have been inspected. I think that's what you're saying. That's not very different than what happens here. The other thing in Italy that I always think about is a lot of the old buildings have lead pipes, right? Isn't that also the case? I mean, that's why everybody's drinking mineral water in Italy. So what do you do in a case like that? Is it legal to have lead pipes in Italy in these old buildings, or do they have to remove them?
Lead pipes is
lead, come si dice in italiano?
The regular water.
Lead. Lead. In other words, the pipe, right? The pipe. We have a translation issue. I don't know how to say lead.
Anyway, we have in the older most of 99% of the properties in Italy, we have drinkable water comes from the pipeline, from the tap.
Okay, so there's no requirement. There's no concern about that. I mean, I do worry about the old construction, but your architect or engineer will tell you.
Yeah, they will take care. Yeah, yeah. So let's say that the due diligence. So we concludes in the right way, and
Next page.
and we don't find any critical issues. So at this point, we have
this one.
No,
Okay, go back.
The right one. Yeah. At this point, after the offer is accepted and the due diligence came in there, so the buyer doesn't find any critical issues. We have two options. In Italy, we can sign a binding contract, which in Italian language wording is a contratto preliminare, and this binding contract can be recorded or can be just a simple piece of paper signed by the parties, and usually according the binding contract, the buyer pays the first down payment, which could be even substantial because the seller always tries to ask 30%, 40%, but we usually negotiate from 30 to 25, 20%. And
mechanically, let's just use round numbers and say it's $1 million property. You have to come up with 300,000. How does the American buyer make that payment? How do they do that? Can't have a bank account yet.
If they were not able to open a banking account, which is possible, but it's not easy. With many banks, they refuse to open a banking account to someone who has not the residence in Italy.
Right.
Doesn't matter, Italian or American, but if you don't have the residency, they have a special procedure which is very complicated, and many banks refuse that. So if you don't have the banking account, our firm can function as escrow service, or they can send the money directly to the seller by international wire transfer. But the point is that signing the binding contract by the simple piece of paper, so the not registered in the public records contract, this wouldn't protect the buyer, because theoretically the seller can sell the property 10 times to 10 different sellers.
You want to record the contract
and notarize the signature. In this way, the contract will become public, and when a next buyer will come to visit the property, he will immediately will be aware that the property is under binding contract, and he will lose all the interest to purchase the property. And going to learn which information, which details will have the binding contract. Let's say that the binding contract should have the more accurate regulation of the relationship between seller and buyer, and including all the obligation for the parties to sign the contract, and a specific deadline within which the contract should be signed.
So if the buyer goes to you, you're going to definitely record the contract so that he's protected.
He's protected, and he can even wait longer to sign the deed of sale.
The deed. I understand.
Yeah. And so let's take a look at the end.
One more page.
Yeah. The deed of sale, which needs to be signed before notaio. Notaio, as I mentioned in the beginning, is a professional who has a similar function of the U.S. public notary, but he has also legal knowledge, and he's a public officer. He's the only one in Italy as a professional to transfer, to create a deed which will entitle to transfer the property to the buyer.
Right.
And he will act on behalf of the Italian tax agency, and he will collect the money
The transfer tax we talked about earlier.
Yeah, the purchase tax. Yeah, and then he or she will pay to the Italian tax agency. And
what is the notaio? How does he get paid? How does the notaio does this for a fee?
He gets paid according to the amount of the deal. He has a little percentage, but let's say that his fee can go starting from 1,500 till even 7,000-8,000 for the huge deal, the big deal.
Right, and that's paid by whom? Ultimately, it comes out of the buyer's proceeds. But is it an obligation of the seller to pay it, or does the buyer pay it?
The notaio is chosen by the buyer and is paid by the buyer.
Okay, that's the answer.
Buyer's obligation.
So any buyer has to also know that when he chooses a notaio, and of course he has no way to choose a good or bad notaio unless he goes to somebody knowledgeable like you or a broker perhaps. So he has to know that in addition to the purchase tax, he also has to pay the notaio fee.
Right.
Which is, as you say,
Yeah,
somewhere 1,500 to 9,000 euros, which is not inexpensive.
Yeah, I would say that so the buyer should expect to pay the realtor fee, the notaio fee, and the attorney fee if he decides to hire an attorney.
Or you negotiate him out of paying the broker's fee so he could pay you something else, right? You can negotiate out of the broker's fee.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's keep going.
So we get to the conclusion of this webinar, and so why to use an attorney or purchasing process of a property in Italy. I would say that so it is an attorney's role to protect the buyer, as we talked in the beginning. Attorneys play a big role to protect the buyers from hidden issues and potential problems before they become a real problem. The time to find and close the deal is significantly faster with an attorney. With the help of an attorney, the buyer, like you just said, would probably save 15% or even more on the entire transaction and would avoid headaches and waste of time for the buyer. And also, an attorney opens an opportunity to link with the right
Well, you're talking about mortgage
loan if the buyer matches the requirements to be eligible.
And we didn't talk about this a great deal, Antonello, but in, let's call it residential deals, there are now mortgages being given on these properties. If the buyer is what we call a W-2 taxpayer, has what I would call verifiable income, the Italian banks look at U.S. buyers and they will loan to them. Is that correct?
Yeah, the banks would give the loan, would issue a loan according some certain requirements. It's not easy to get a loan for the foreign buyer, but most of all, the bank require to show the income
right.
during the last 3 years in the States, and they look with favor all the people who has a permanent job with salary, and the process which we went through sometime with some clients of mine who purchased a property in Italy getting a loan is to certify the U.S. tax return in Italian consulate in the States, to translate all the salary, the payroll, and according to these requirements, the bank might give the loan.
Verifiable income.
Yeah.
Okay, Amanda, do we have any questions? I think we're finished. We have no questions. Anybody out there with a question?
I saw some question in the beginning, but All
right, we probably bored everybody.
Someone asked, is there a downside to working with multiple real estate agents?
That's a good question. I was thinking that myself. I mean, if you work with multiple real estate agents without an engagement letter, you could show up at the closing and pay 3% to 3 different people who introduced you to a property. That's a great question. You understand the question, Antonello?
Yeah, but usually, so when you work with three real estate agents simultaneously, it can happen only visiting the property. But at some point, you have to choose which property you like and which property you would like to submit an offer. So I don't think you can go ahead with the three realtor and get committed to pay the three realtor because
Good.
The obligation to pay the realtor fee comes out only when the realtor can prove that he linked it with the buyer and with the seller, and you submit the offer and you sign the binding contract. So otherwise, he wouldn't be entitled to charge a fee. I don't know if my answer was
No,
clear.
I think we understand, but I mean, it is risky to work with multiple. You should pick one with an engagement letter and make the terms of your payment to him very clear.
Yeah, but there wouldn't be a risk until you are really sure that you're gonna buy this property. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, sure.
I guess the one question we did have earlier, people were asking whether or not buying a property in Italy makes you an Italian tax resident, okay? And there is an income tax treaty between the United States and Italy speaking about U.S. citizens. And basically, Italy taxes on the basis of residence, America taxes on the basis of citizenship. The treaty basically says it's very difficult to become an Italian resident unless you spend more than half the year there, and then they basically have a tiebreaker rule that looks at where your permanent abode is. So it's not that it's dangerous, but if you buy a residence and you declare that it's your, permanent residence and you're living there all the time, then yes, you can become an Italian tax resident, and the Italian tax rates are considerably higher than the U.S., 45%, including federal, state, local. There's exemptions and exclusions like everywhere else. You just need to have a tax advisor who advises you along the way how not to become an Italian tax resident unless you want to become one. If you do, probably the rate of tax, especially in the north of Italy where you don't have a lot of negotiating room, is likely to be higher than it would be in the U.S. And you're not going to pay in both places. You'll get a credit. But the bottom line is you need a tax advisor in both places to help you. And if you come to Smolin, we can help recommend you to get an Italian tax advisor that's competent, and I'm sure Antonello would be happy to help you close the transaction.
Yeah, I'm absolutely agree. It's very important to get a tax advisor while you, especially as a U.S. buyer.
Both countries.
Yeah, but especially
American and Italian.
It's very critical and sensitive issue. Yeah, right.
Okay, thank you.
Some other questions?